Hello and welcome to Safety Tavern's video on Lockout, Tagout, and Hazardous Energy Control. This one is absolutely going to be an OSHA 1926 focus, but understand the whole mentality behind this is how do you as a company, as a crew, and as an employee, how do you make sure that no energy is just going to be released? And that's the whole mindset of Lockout, Tagout. How are you going to make sure that no energy gets released, right? Controlling the energy. There are good ideas, and if your mind is wrapping around what OSHA's mindset is for this, you're going to be okay. There are some companies who have set up what could be called a deviation in what OSHA is telling them to do, but they're actually getting more strict. They're being more stringent, and that is a great thing. That is a good thing. Remember, OSHA is that low bar. OSHA is a very low bar. If you aim to have a lockout tagout policy that is just 100% compliant with OSHA, man, there's holes. There's going to be holes because OSHA doesn't tell you your standard operating procedure. OSHA doesn't tell you exactly how to do everything. They just give you the highlight points. So please do not aim for OSHA as your your standard operating procedure on how to perform lockout tagout. This needs to be done with, and again, I'm going to reference back to my titans, my people, my superintendents, whether male or female. They've been in the industry for 20, 30 years, and they know what they're doing. They know all of the energy lock points of this piece of gear. They are familiar with this piece of gear. Those are the people that absolutely need to be involved in this lockout tagout. Even if not the actual installation of the locks, at the very least the creation of the lockout tagout policy for this piece of gear. And just on this, again, this is construction. On this job site, it may be this one policy, but on the next job site, we need to review that policy. Don't piggyback one policy to every single job because, man, this one could have a triple redundancy. This other job could have battery backups. This one job could have water coming in from 5 different places. You don't know. It needs to be custom, and it needs to be reviewed by a competent person, right? We've already, go back and watch the competent video. It needs to be reviewed by a competent person for your company that knows the gear. It cannot be just some, well, I'm an electrician. No, you need to know this gear. And if you don't know this gear, you need to go read the manuals, talk to the manufacturer until you are familiar with this gear before you tell people how to lock out this gear. Does that make sense? You need to have your mind needs to be wrapped around the blueprints, the layouts, the CAD drawings, whatever it is that your company is using as a build schematic to control the energy going into and out of, thus being able to make it safe. Now that is from a superintendent level and a foreman level. At an employee level, before you pull anything out, before you pull your saw out, before you pull your anything that's going to demolition, that's going to cut, or even electricians, your fish tape, fiber boys, your fish tape, before you pull any of that stuff out, you need to understand where you're going to stick it and what all is hot that's in that box. Right? Where all are you going to run the risk of running into contact with energy, with electricity? And it's not just electricity, it's hydraulic power, it's gravitational power. These are all things where when I do this, what is the worst case scenario? That is what lockout tagout is all about. Let's look at some regulations. Now, just so everyone's clear, I'm going to dance back and forth between 1910 and 1926. Because I'm trying to give everyone a good idea of the mindset of OSHA. What is the mindset of OSHA as a whole so you can build a custom lockout tagout program for your job site. We are going to dance back and forth. OSHA regulations on lockout tagout. First, what energy should be controlled? 1910-147 Charlie 7 IA. Each authorized employee shall receive training in the recognition of applicable hazardous energy sources, the type and magnitude of the energy available in the workplace, and the methods and means necessary for energy isolation and control. So what energy should be controlled? All of it. Electrical energy, hydraulic energy, which is water or plumbing, pneumatic energy, as well as mechanical energy. Any other form of energy, it needs to be controlled too. All energy needs to be controlled at all times. Now, in order to control this energy, we're going to use forms of locking out energy, and later on we'll talk about tagging out. First, 1910-147 Charlie 8, energy isolation. Lockout or tagout shall be performed only by authorized employees who are performing the servicing or maintenance. And just so we're all familiar, 1926-32 Delta, authorized means a person approved or assigned by the employer. Now, as an employer, before you assign somebody to being a lockout, tagout authorized person, you need to make sure they know the schematics of the actual piece of equipment that they're working on, as well as what are the regulations that are going to apply to this, as well as what are the lockout, tagout equipment available to lock out the energy, as well as the entire system. Not just the schematics of the actual item, but also where all is it getting power from? What else could turn this thing on? What's going to be affected down the line as well as up the line, and where are all those safe places to lock out? Before a company assigns somebody as authorized, you need to make sure that they have a competency with this specific piece of equipment and the overall layout of how this piece of equipment ties into the entire system. They need to understand all this before you, as an employer, as a company, assign this person lockout duties. Now, assuming you have the right person that is an authorized person, 1910-147 Echo 2I, the work area shall be checked to ensure that all employees have been safely positioned or removed. Now, I'm going to take it a step further and say, don't just look at your employees, look at the general public, other trades, GC, look at anybody that could be affected before you shut this power down, right? Because this is the installation part. Before you shut the power down, and I don't mean electricity, I mean electricity, hydraulic, mechanical, before you lock this thing out, make sure everybody that could be affected is notified, and anyone that needs to be moved out of the area is moved out of the area. Now, this one is just basic logic. When should it be installed? As soon as the power is isolated. Not when you have time, not when the boss finally arrives, not when the customer finally agrees to it. It's very simple. As soon as the power is isolated. The minute you flip that breaker, that lock goes on. What devices should be used? Now, I could throw in a bunch of other regulations in here talking about specific sizes, shapes, colors, so on and so forth. But we're going to focus on 1910-147 Charlie 5 II. Lockout devices and tagout devices shall be singularly identified, shall be the only devices used for controlling energy, shall not be used for other purposes, and shall meet the following requirements. Now, I'm going to break all the regulations down into some basic points, okay? First and foremost, singularly identified. That means if I take this key right here and I throw it into this pile, I can find that key. It also means I can take this key and it only fits in one of these locks. If you have a key that fits into all these locks, that is not singularly identified because this key doesn't specifically go to this lock. The solution for this is make sure you have your sticker on there marking this as a lockout device. Make sure you have one key for one lock and no combination locks ever. Ever, ever, ever. Combination locks have nothing to do with lockout, tagout. So we've taken care of singularly. Now we got to get to the identified, and that is where I would actually take this key and this lock. I'd go get me a $30 etcher and etch the lock and the key. Line them up. And you can make up whatever numbers you want, just as long as you keep it organized, which locks go to which keys. And I strongly recommend you keep some kind of a log that tells you exactly which key went on to which place. That way, if you need to pop it off for whatever emergency reasons, you're not fumbling around with all the keys. I think it's this one. No, it's that one. Oh, wait, I think it's this key. You know exactly where the key is. You know exactly what the number is. And you can pop that lock quickly if there's an emergency that needs you to do it. The next thing we're going to look at is giving the GC keys. Absolutely not. If the GC wants to have additional lockout devices that they have locks and keys to, great. That's a place where these clasps are amazing. But we do not give the GCs our own, as a subcontractor, we do not give the GCs the key to our safety. That is our safety. That keeps our people safe. That keeps me as an employee or me as a foreman. It keeps my crew safe. As a superintendent, it keeps my crews safe. We do not give the key that opens up the energy to a general contractor. If they want to lock on to, in addition to, they can. But we don't give them our key, ever. All right, now the next two that we're going to look at is shall be the only devices used for controlling energy and shall not be used for other purposes. These two are kind of linked in together. And for the majority of us, we know exactly what it's saying, but there's a small group of people that I've met, and they're good foremen, But what they do is they take their lockout lock and they lock their gang box up at the end of the day. That's a no-no. If it is a lockout lock, it is to be used only for lockout locks. The other group of people, what they'll do is they'll just take their gang box lock and they'll throw it on to temporarily lock something out. And that's a no-no also, according to this regulation. Does everyone understand this? You cannot just throw a random lock on to anything you want and lock out. Now, what it's also getting at is this. Does anyone think that OSHA believes this to be a lockout device? Anybody think zip ties are supposed to be used as lockout devices? What about crescent wrenches? Does anyone believe that a monkey wrench should be able to be used as a lockout device? These are all unacceptable. If it is a lockout device, it is a lockout device. If it is not, then it's not. That's it. You cannot mix and match what this thing is. And this is OSHA telling you this. Now, there is a regulation that specifically lays out color, shape, size, and all that. And I'm going to break it down for you. Overall, it needs to be, when I walk into a room, I can tell that device is a lockout device. When I walk into a room, looking across the room, I can tell, either by shape, size, or color. I'll give you an example of what OSHA is trying to prevent. Let's say that the plumbers are using blue locks to lock out their stuff, but the GC is also using blue locks to lock their security gates. Well, what if this tag right here somehow gets pulled off? Now, anyone walking in this room could possibly think that the GC just has a security lock here, and they may remove the lock without understanding that this is a lockout tagout device. And that's where you need to coordinate with the rest of the job. You are not just living in a little tiny bubble all by yourself. It needs to be very clear this is a lockout tagout device across the entire job site. What should the tag say? This is not acceptable. First of all, this is warning of the hazard when you're already being exposed to it. This is unacceptable. But again, if we look back at 1910-147 Charlie 5 IIB, tagout devices shall be standardized within the facility, as well as, in case of tagout devices, print and format shall be standardized. That means your chicken scratch writing is not acceptable. It needs to be print and format standardized. 1926 417 Bravo, equipment and circuits that are de-energized shall be rendered inoperative and shall have tags attached at all points where such equipment or circuits can be energized. 1926 417 Charlie, tags shall be placed to identify plainly the equipment or circuits being worked on. 1926 961 Charlie 5, tags shall prohibit operation of the disconnecting means and shall indicate that employees are at work. 1926 147 Charlie 7 II Charlie, tags must be legible and understandable by all authorized employees, affected employees, and all other employees whose work operations are or may be in the area in order to be effective. 1910 147 Charlie 5 III, tagout devices shall warn against hazardous conditions if the machine or equipment is energized and shall include a legend such as the following: do not start, do not open, do not close, do not energize, do not operate. One of these. 1910 147 Charlie 5 II Delta, identifiable. Lockout devices and tagout devices shall indicate the identity of the employee applying the devices. So it needs to have your name on it. So who can remove the devices? 1910 147 Echo 3, lockout or tagout devices removal. Each lockout or tagout device shall be removed from each energy isolating device by the employee who applied the device. By the employee. The person who puts it on is the only person who can pull it off. This is why combination locks are unacceptable. This is why everybody having keys to the same lockout lock is unacceptable. By the employee who applied the device. Exceptions to paragraph E3 are, holy crap, that's a whole bunch of words. Don't worry, we're going to break this down. If the employee who put the lock on is not available to remove it, then you can remove that device under the direction of the employer. And I would say that would be the competent person of lockout tagout for that job site. That's that senior superintendent in charge of that job site. That's when, okay, let's pop this lock. Provided the specific procedures and training for such removal has been developed, documented, and incorporated into the employer's energy control program. That means if this is not written, that this is a procedure that you can do, cutting off that lock, then you can't do it. So it needs to be documented and incorporated into the employer's energy control program. The employer shall demonstrate that the specific procedure provides equivalent safety to the removal of the device by the authorized employee who applied it. The specific procedure shall include at least the following elements. Verification by the employer that the authorized employee who applied the device is not at the facility, meaning they're not here. We need to pop this lock, they're not here. If they're just on the other side of the facility, no, that doesn't count. And if this is the case, who should be told about the lockout tagout device being removed? Making all reasonable efforts to contact that authorized employee to inform them that their lockout or tagout device has been removed, and ensuring that that authorized employee has the knowledge before they resume work at the facility. Holy cow, wasn't that a whole bunch? Now let's look at re-energizing. We're going to take a look again. Each authorized employee shall receive training in the recognition of applicable hazardous energy sources, the type and magnitude of the energy available in the workplace, and the methods and means necessary for energy isolation and control. And that control is where we're re-energizing. Now, I do not have the ability to give you a re-energizing procedure on this video, but I can tell you as a rule of thumb, first of all, you get the work done, and congratulations, guys. I'm sure that was a lot of work. Next, look at your company safety manual, your GC safety manual, any safety manuals, OSHA regulations, anything that applies to your area, and make sure that your energization plan follows whatever building's rules, regulations that it needs to. Once you have this knocked out, next we need to look at the drawings and make sure that the whole system, what we're energizing here, is complementary to the entire system and it's not going to throw anything off. Next, we put a plan together. When we energize, what is all of the safety precautions that we need to do? Who's going to do the energizing? If there's any PPE that's specifically required for this energization, then we take that plan and we talk to the trades, GCs, maybe customer, anyone who could be affected by this energization plan. We talk to them, let them know, make sure that we're scheduling good. Then we turn around and we train our employees on the actual energizing plan, the ones who are going to be affected as well as the ones that are going to participate in it. And then on the day of energization, we occupy the areas that we need to occupy, make everything safe, kick anyone out of the area that we need to kick out, of course, politely and using manners. But then you also need to look at, do you need any special tools or do you need any special precautionary equipment? For electrical specifically, most of the time we're energizing, we need to make sure that there's a fire extinguisher nearby. But we also need to think about downhole awareness. And what this is if I'm energizing right here and what I'm going to energize is going to send electricity out to all these places, then I need to make sure that a fire doesn't pop up right here. And if it does pop up, I may need to have people right here. But also, I may need to have those people tell me, kill the power. Now, could I yell across the job site? Sure. Or I may need to use things like radios. And that may be that all 5 of these people need radios. That way they can communicate with me. So that would be 6 radios, as well as fire extinguishers. And this is where, when you start getting into the planning phase, you really need to lay out exactly what can go wrong and now what are we going to do about it. So now that we have our emergency action plans ready to go, just in case this energizing, and again, this is whether it's plumbing, it doesn't matter. Whatever you're energizing, how can it go wrong? So before you pop that lock, you need to coordinate all of this stuff. Make sure everything's ready to go. This is called re-energizing. This is what's happening when you pull that lock off. You're saying that you, as the authorized person, are taking responsibility of all of this. And if that's what you're saying, then you're good to go. Let's get that lock pulled off. 1926, 961, Charlie 13, re-energizing lines and equipment. The employer shall ensure that no one initiates action to re-energize the lines or equipment at a point of disconnect until all protective grounds have been removed, all crews working on the lines or equipment release their clearances, all employees are clear of the lines and equipment, and all protective tags are removed from that point of disconnection. So I just walked you through pretty much this. In my experience, there have been 2 massive fights on job sites in regards to lockout tagout. The first one is going to be the safety guy. I've seen many of construction job sites where they tried to make the safety guy the responsible for lockout tagout. And from a bird's eye view, that sounds great. The problem is the majority of safety personnel on job sites, they're literally just the new person, or they're the person that's disposable. They're not really all that important. We don't really need them. We just need them to manage the lockout tagout system. And if this is the case, no. What that safety person can be for is to be a key holder. But the person that needs to be authorizing energization is not the safety guy or girl, whatever. It's the superintendent in charge of the job. That is the person that knows every single line. They know every piece of equipment. That is the person that has pored over the drawings over and over and over again. That is a person that is familiar with every single piece of gear there. Not the safety person that you hired just to go sit in meetings and file paperwork for you. It's the superintendent. Now you can have the safety person be the key holder to where the superintendent says, hey, safety person, go pop that lock for this foreman. Good to go. But understand, if you're going to have the safety person responsible for your lockout tagout program, now that safety person needs to be absolutely knowledgeable about every single thing in the system that they are energizing. That means they need to know the ins and outs of every single piece of gear in that line. The next big argument is employee locks. And I'm going to take the electrical trade because that's a little bit of my forte, but this is a pretty simple situation. You're a foreman, you get a new employee, you assign him to doing trim out. And before you send him to work, you ask him, have you had lockout training? And if you work at one of my companies, that employee better say yes. Then you turn around and you say, okay, how do you know that this is de-energized? And then you walk them through where to get a lock from, and then you walk them through identifying the breaker, and then immediately locking out the breaker, and then turn around and testing to make sure the power is dead. Now that takes care of the employee actually physically doing the work right now. But what if you have multiple employees working on that same leg? And then also, once the employees are done doing that work, does that mean that the floor is energized or able to be energized? No, which means you're probably going to have a form of a control lock, which is still lockout tagout, but it's you as a foreman, your floor, your area, your room, you controlling it as well. So you could potentially have 5 or 6 locks installed just for one crew. I hope this video finds you well. Remember, it's extremely hard for me to sit in this office and tell you the right lockout tagout pattern, and that's the best word I can use, is pattern or procedure to be used on your job site, because I don't know the gear you're working with. I don't know, you could be a plumber, you could be a mechanic working on a forklift. I don't know the actual layout of what you're working on. And just please make sure you lock out every bit of energy that could hurt you. Please take care of yourself, look after each other. The new people on the job site, man, they are relying on you to teach them the right way to do this. If you have bad habits, kill the bad habits now. Kill them now, because what's going to end up happening is that new person, they don't have your 20 years of experience. And yes, I'm talking to my veterans in the industry. They don't have your 20 years of experience, and they're only seeing what you let them see. And train them the right way. They're not going to have that natural instinct to jump back, right? The one that saved you those 3 or 4 times that you had that uncontrolled release of energy, it's not going to save them because they're new. They don't know what they're doing, and they're going to get hit. And it's going to be your fault. I'm telling you right now, you may not go to jail. You may not end up in any court case, but it's going to be your fault that person got hit because you taught them the bad habits that you either created or that you learned yourself from someone else. Stop the cycle now. Lockout tagout is all about what if. It's all about what if. And we're going to control this energy. We are going to control it. Who's in control of the job site? Are you, or is fate? Because if fate's in control of the job site, we're all screwed. Because I think we've all made a lot of mistakes. Now, if you're in control of the job site, good. Control that energy. There are many of hundreds of millions of man hours that have gone, that have done the exact same thing that you're doing, and nobody got hurt. Control the energy. It is possible. It just takes a little bit of extra time, and it might take a little bit of money. Lockout tagout stuff is not very cheap, unfortunately. Spend the money. Protect our people. I hope this video finds you well. See you in the next one.